As Unitarian Universalists in Canada, we say we have 7 principles to guide our choices, 6 sources to nourish our spirits, and 5 aspirations to help us grow. And hopefully, at some point, we might say 8 principles to guide our choices, but right now it's 7. These aspirations, these 5 aspirations, are unique to Canadian Unitarian Universalism, and they're intended to help us move towards our vision of a world in which our interdependence calls us to love and justice. Our first aspiration reads, "We aspire to be deeply connected. We strive to foster healthy relationships amongst and within UU communities, with the broader world, and with all life." And this obviously echoes our 7th principle, respect for the interdependent web of which we are a part. And for me, ever since I became a Unitarian all those years ago, this sense of connection is really its essence. We are the religion of connecting to our inner selves, connecting to one another, to the earth, to the mystery. Our lives are an endless series of dynamic connections. I think connection could be our middle name, Unitarian Connection Universalism. Many of you have met my colleague, the Reverend Peter Bulata, and who's been a guest speaker here. And in 2006, Peter gave the Confluence Lecture, which is the lecture given by a Canadian UU minister each year at the annual conference. And Peter argued that Unitarianism needs to develop a theology of place, belonging, that reorients human beings to what we've already named the interdependent web. That web is larger than us, awe-inspiring, breathtaking. We're not outside the web of life, imposing our will upon it, but we're embedded within it, one of a myriad of nodes in a complex net. Mutual relatedness must emerge as a central norm for Unitarian theology and practice. And I really do think that in Canada, that's what's been happening for the past 14 years. We've been developing this norm of mutual relatedness. And that's really this observation of how life works on the planet. Complex ecosystems of hundreds of species living together, feeding each other, all connected in this web of life. And so our first aspiration directs us towards how we practice this, and that's by fostering healthy relationships. It directs us towards an action of building good relationships. Pagan activist Starhawk says that when a system is whole and healthy, when it's based on relationships of interdependence and cooperation, that further resilience, diversity, abundance, sustainability, creativity, and freedom, it exhibits what humans call justice. And so by fostering healthy relationships, we help to create justice, thus living out our vision of our interdependence, calling us to love and justice. So this aspiration of deeply connected is one of our signposts guiding us towards our vision. And this is a funny time to be talking about this because we're struggling because of our interdependence. Centuries of human domination and destruction are coming back at us. But we need healthy relationships to end racism and oppression of all people, to end exploitation, to heal the atmosphere, to stop species extinction. We're really, really experiencing just how deeply connected we are. I mean, think of the coronavirus. It spreads through the air that surrounds us all. It uses our very breath of life to help itself while harming us. Right now, we're solving this with separation. And it's not a great solution, it's a blunt force, but I do hope it will break the cycle of rising numbers. But it's hard because we are so interdependent. To live in isolation from one another is not normal. And we're using, as best we can, technology to keep us connected, to keep us seeing each other, even if we can't hug each other or sing together. But for me, these past few months have made it clear that our interdependence is not just a scientific truth, but a spiritual one. We need one another. We need one another so deeply. It's a spiritual truth I first learned many years ago. When I was 18 and I had just graduated from high school, we left Mississauga for Saskatoon for my dad's work. And it wasn't a surprise, but it didn't make it any less devastating. And on one of the first nights in Saskatoon, I sobbed and sobbed and sobbed for hours and hours. And finally, exhausted and drained, I was just completely empty. And in that just moment of rock bottom despair, there came this sort of vision or sensation or a dream. And I had a very visceral experience of an endless golden net, interwoven and uneven. Some threads were thick, some were thin, some joined up closely, others stretched far into the distance. But the net was magnificent. It was beautiful and comforting. And being held in that net in that moment, seeing the threads connecting me, I became aware that distance didn't end all my connections, that while I was lonely, I was in a very real sense not alone and would never be alone. Now, maybe if I'd been raised Christian, Jesus would have come to my aid that night of despair. But what came to me instead was this web of connection. This sense of being connected by golden threads has been a source of comfort in times of trouble ever since. And while I've never again felt it as strongly and clearly as I did that Saskatoon night, I still remember that sense of having the golden threads flowing all around me, reminding me that I'm part of the whole now and always. And that holds true even in the midst of this lockdown, which shrinks my world back down to Mark, Tico the dog, and the cats. We're all so deeply connected to one another and the earth. We're held in golden threads of life, and we need one another. When we pause now, we're going to take a moment to hear an anthem from our choir. And while you're listening, I invite you to consider your golden threads. Where do your connections lead? What do they look like to you? What holds you? In the 2nd century, Roman emperor and Stoic philosopher Marcus Aurelius wrote, "Everything is interwoven and the web is holy." Our sense of deep connection is ancient knowledge. In the 7th century, Chinese Buddhism created the metaphor of Indra's net. And the god Indra creates a vast, intricate net that stretches out indefinitely. And at every point the threads meet, there's a sparkling jewel, and each jewel reflects the other jewels in the net. There's no center, no beginning, no end, just threads and jewels shimmering together, reflecting one another. And Indra's net is a symbol of that mutual relatedness. All of us connected by golden threads, each of us a shining jewel. Now, I grew up in an agnostic household, and my public school education did not extend to ancient Chinese Buddhist philosophy or Roman emperors. And yet, like them, I too had this experience of the web of connection, of those golden threads stretching out everywhere. Scientific and spiritual knowledge. And of course, this is indigenous knowledge as well. The Anishinaabe and the Haudenosaunee understood themselves as being in relationship with everything else in the world, not as being lords above, but in relationship with. They understood that they learned from animals and plants and trees and water and earth and received food and medicine and shelter. And they understood that their obligation in return was to take care of all of these beings, to help them to thrive as well, so that they could take care of each other and live in a world of reciprocity, of give and take among all beings. Right now, we live in a society, an economy that is predicated on seeing the world as a collection of objects to be used for us, by us, for our needs, without regard for much else. But our religious tradition is choosing this older, greater, deeper knowledge that we are part of the interdependent web of all existence. And so we're being asked to switch from seeing the world as a collection of objects to living as if the world is a communion of subjects. And that's a challenge when we're built on objectivity and separation. And so we're trying to figure out how to learn to integrate all the good we've gained with these old ways, all the advantage that we have, the connections that we've made this way, into this new worldview, this new old worldview. And I think it just begins with small steps and personal choices that will build up as we make the transition. This pandemic is reminding us that we're creatures of breath and blood, vulnerable. And so perhaps this is an opportunity to reconnect and build threads with other creatures. Right now, we're vulnerable when we go out into the world, like the cardinals when they fly from the tree, the mouse when it ventures out from the grass. They've always had to venture into danger when they leave home. And perhaps this new sense of vulnerability will help us extend our compassion to all of our relatives. A little girl's out in a rowboat on a lake with her dad on a bright summer's day. And she hears a great buzzing and looks down and sees this yellow jacket hornet resting on her arm. Her eyes get big and she looks to her dad because insects terrify her. And her father just says, "Don't move and the bee won't bother you." And he keeps rowing. But she's scared, so she hisses at her dad to do something. And her dad says, "He's tired. It's a hot day and all living creatures need rest. He's probably been flying up the lake and needs to give himself a break. Once he's rested enough, he'll keep going." And the girl's astonished. Just let the yellow jacket be? And so she nervously looks back down at him and she sees the beauty of his body, all the yellow and the black, his wings folded neatly, the sort of the perfection of his form, how beautiful he is. And she begins to relax and the insect flutters, tests his wings and flies off, flies back over the water into the woods away on his business. And this is just a little story, but her father treats that bee like a subject, a he with his own journey, not a thing to be swatted away. And in doing so, helps his daughter see that bee that way too. And she understands herself for the first time as part of this great whole, as part of a world of connection. This is just a small moment, but it's a vital one. Because it takes time to breathe and let a hornet land on you without swatting it away. It takes time to see an insect as a being with its own life on a journey. Living in a world of relationships means to live in a world of complexity and reciprocity. And we all know managing relationships is challenging. It takes more time to keep relationships healthy and strong than just getting something done, acting, and achieving. But it's worth it if we want to live in that living world of love and justice. And so as we head into this next lockdown, I encourage you to consider the threads of relationship that bind you into the web of all life. Which ones hold you golden and glowing, the ones you know will always keep you connected? Which threads feel thin and need some love and intention to grow stronger? And are there threads that are tugging on you too hard, past your capacity? Is there a way you can loosen that thread, let it go slack, help it bring somebody else in who can help manage that thread? Where are the knots that are blocking your connections? These are things that matter, that we need to take time to tend to. And if you have room in your life for more threads, why not seek out relationships with our plant and animal kin? I know several of you have already gotten dogs. I'm suffering from puppy envy right now. But you could also feed a hungry bird outside on a bird feeder, or care for a plant, help a tired insect. These are also small and yet vital steps to help us reframe ourselves and to be parting this larger, intricate web of life on this planet. We aspire to be deeply connected. We strive to foster healthy relationships amongst and within UU communities, with the broader world, and with all life. And in the days to come, may we all find ways to enhance the golden threads of our lives. May we remember we live in kinship with all beings. May we remember, even as we distance from one another, that the threads between us remain strong. So say we all.